Our next artist is Jeff Koons. This podcast is a continuation of our global contemporary chapter with a focus on women in art. And we're going to start off by talking about the artist Jeff Koons. He's pictured here on the right, top right. He's really famous for his big balloon sculptures that you saw it on the roof on the Met. You've probably seen them in some parks somewhere. They're all over the place. He is a very wealthy man, very famous. He's has millions, makes millions for making objects such as this, like a blown up inflatable bunny. Or he's collaborated with Louis Vuitton to put old master paintings onto handbags. So he has a really interesting style, almost sort of comical, colorful artwork. Koons is a Pennsylvanian-born artist, and he's working in New York. And as you probably noticed, a lot of our contemporary artists are working in New York. You happen to live at the center of the art world. After World War II, everything moved to the United States because Europe was basically left in crumbles. So Koons initially started his career as a commodities broker, and then he switched over to making art, and he likes to use items that are mass produced. You should write that down. So mass produced. He's interested in pop culture, P-U-P. He is what we call a pop artist. Now, pop artists, the movement really started with Andy Warhol, taking images of Marilyn Monroe. You've probably seen them, and replicating them over and over and over again. He also makes the Campbell soup cans as well. So Koons is he's a contemporary pop artist working in that vein, and his work that we're going to look at is this Pink Panther done in 1988. It is glazed porcelain, and you can see that it is a woman. She is sort of half dressed with a Pink Panther, and it is I kind of struggled whether or not to put this in the section on women because it's the artist, in women artist chapter, because it's unclear whether or not Koons is critiquing the way that we view women in pop culture, or is he becoming a part of it? And that's something that we're going to talk about. To get started, we need to introduce a new vocabulary word. It's called kitsch. Well, what is kitsch? So write this down. Kitsch is it's of German origin, and it refers to mass-produced imagery designed to please the broadest audience possible. And this audience is one with objectionable tastes. So think of objects and images that are super popular and kind of annoying, like pink flamingos or hearts everywhere. It's all sort of shallow, fake, reproduced over and over and over and over again. Like, for example, if you really want to talk about love in art, you're probably not going to put hearts everywhere because it's been mass produced so many times that a heart doesn't really, just simply drawing a heart, doesn't really communicate the nuances and the complexity of love. That would be sort of an example of the opposite of kitsch, whereas kitsch is just like, let's just put a heart on it. All right, kitsch is used to describe images like this. This is what's called a Hummel figurine, and they were really popular in Germany, and a lot of people still collect them. This idea of kitsch is actually kind of harsh because most of us have kitsch items all over our house, but anyways, okay. So here's this little Hummel figure. You should write this down, that Koons was inspired by Hummel figurines. And he created this whole exhibition of artwork called Banality. Write this down, banality. Okay, so let's define banality together. So I Googled it. It's the fact or condition of being banal, unoriginality. There's this staleness, it's unimaginative, it's trite, it's dull, it's something we see all over the place. And so he's basically saying that all of these kitsch items, this is banality. This just like kind of tacky and overdone and lacks its original meaning. Oh, this is a Koons piece, Michael Jackson, all covered in gold. Okay, so let's read this. Imagine you're walking into an art gallery and seeing overgrown toys or cartoon characters presented as sculpture. Think of this like, think of Bernini or Michelangelo. That's sculpture, but here we have these things. That's what you would have seen if you entered into his show called Banality. And he had about 20 pieces of sculpture done in porcelain and polychromed. Polychrome meaning different colored wood. And it was meant to affront the taste. It was meant to sort of shock you or offend you. They're highly polished, plasticky sort of feelings. Um, and they were made in a factory. Koons doesn't actually touch his artwork. Somebody else makes his artwork, but he comes up with the ideas. I mean, he will go in and he will do a few things here or there, but overall he hires a team of artists. You should write that down. That's important to process is the fact that he hires people to make them. Um, and he creates several of each one. So he creates them in threes. You should write that down. And isn't that a sort of a horror that there are multiple versions of the exact same thing created? So where do we draw the line between something created in a factory, mass produced, and you buy it at Hallmark, and something that's one of a kind and original, and you see it at the museum? He's calling into question the difference between what we call high art, the kind of art that you might see in a museum, and low art, the kind of art that you might find if you, say, go to a Hallmark store and buy a little porcelain sculpture. And Koons actually isn't, it may sound like he's sort of making fun of the everyday Joe, but he's not. He's actually saying that he loves this mass-produced stuff, and he loves this kitsch stuff, and it's okay if you have a ton of these little tacky sculptures. Enjoy it, love it. This is the world that we live in. So he's sort of rejoicing in this, and he's blending the two, the high culture and what he calls low culture, the high and the low. But his name is interesting, right? He calls it banality, and you know, which is sort of a negative thing as well. Like it's unimaginative. Okay, so here we have our sculpture of Pink Panther. He's literally making the woman into an object, and she is sort of a stereotypical object too. She's life-size. She plays out stereotypes that we see about women in popular culture. She's blonde and she has large breasts. She has these red fingernails. She's overly fake and sort of cakey. Her hair looks like it has a ton of hairspray in it, and she puts her head back, smiling, looking towards the viewer. Um, and then Pink Panther seems to be sort of sad, slumped over. His arm is wrapped around her, almost like she's carrying a baby. Um, or almost like you make him think about it in terms of, you know, Kiki Smith. How is this different than Kiki Smith's Woman and Wolf? How are the two interacting in a different way? Um, this Pink Panther, it's from a movie series in 1963, and Pink Panther is a character that was very popular, and he moves around. Let me solving mysteries. Um, So it is the entire piece is meant to look factory made. It is made us to think would make us think of something that we would find in like a tourist shop. It's meant to be kitschy, and there were three of these made. In fact, I think today we might even have more. So the woman, she's named Jayne Mansfield. She's a film actress of the 1950s and 60s, and here she is pictured on the right hand side. She was supposed to be a successor of Marilyn Monroe, and she was doing pretty well at it, but then she had actually a series of bad marriages and pregnancies, and then eventually she dies in a car accident. So it's sort of tragic, actually, her story. She dies pretty young at 37. So the idea of memorializing this sort of wannabe Marilyn Monroe, this is Marilyn Monroe, is sort of tacky in itself. You know, she didn't really have a full career, and the way in which she is, you know, what she's known for is, you know, definitely all about the male gaze. So here we have her on display. Um, So this is what Kuhn's going for, is sort of this tacky thing. Kuhn's is what we call a appropriation artist. So when you appropriate, you're taking things from popular culture and reusing them. And he's reusing it in sort of an ironic way, almost sarcastic about, is this sexy? It's so plastic. Is it real? And I'm going to read from, I believe this is Shmoop directly, because they do it really nicely, or they say this nicely. Kuhn's named this entire series of sculptures banality, which means trite. The collection is an exploration of contemporary culture. Is he making fun of it, or is he glorifying it? You should write that down. Is he making fun of it, or is he glorifying it? It's hard to tell. It reflects mass media on popular culture. He's using sarcasm and irony in subtle ways, asking us to consider why Michael Jackson is gold-plated, or why we have this half-naked movie star holding a Pink Panther. Why does our world look the way that it does? I want to make a comparison between Kuhn's and Cindy Sherman. So think of Cindy Sherman and her work untitled 228. So in this work, she is making a photograph of herself, and she is, showing these cliches of femininity, and she's doing this throughout all of her artworks. Khan Academy says, made photographs of herself that paraded cliches of femininity before an audience that consumed critical theory about the constructed nature of reality and the oppressive manipulation of mass media. Her work was understood as a deconstruction, so deconstruction being a shorthand for the examination and analysis of the elements, so deconstructing these ideas of gender stereotypes. Do you think Kuhn's is doing that? Do you think Kuhn's is deconstructing these gender stereotypes? Or do you think he's sort of playing in it and loving it? Well, he did marry a porn star, and he did make lots of artwork that was quite suggestive. It was in the Whitney a few years ago, and I took a group, and we couldn't go in to see a large part of his collection, or a large part of his work, because everyone was under 18. So I don't know. Take that, and run with it. You decide, what is he doing here? He's definitely playing with us, and he's asking us some questions about the things that we view, and where we sort of where we side with it all, and what we think of it.